Hello and welcome to the Bones Horror Podcast. This is episode 52, The Shining. A family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter where a sinister presence influences their father into violence. Come play with us. Now, we have with us tonight
Hello.
Ewan, Larry,
Hello.
and Jess.
Hello.
Wow, this is a film I've been looking forward to watching again and reviewing. So it's a first one for Jess.
Yes.
No,
And Ewan, I think.
no,
No, it
I've
wasn't
seen it
for
many,
Ewan.
many,
So it's only
many
Jess,
times.
the first one. Yeah. So it's just Jess.
Mhm.
So this film, it had a budget of 19 million and a box office of 47 million. I'm sure it would have done more than that by now. Rotten Tomatoes, what are you thinking?
Well, I
Any of you?
accidentally looked
Larry?
this up, so I best not.
Okay, so you
I'm
don't-
disqualified. from
Paul
this.
always used to do that. He'd look them up. Jess, what are you thinking?
I'm going to say like 85.
Yeah. 84.
Ooh, nice.
So it was directed by Stanley Kubrick of Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket fame. So, did he really do many
do
horror
any.
films?
No.
Is this really a horror film? I'm not sure. So star Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, or his real name's John.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where John and they get to Jack, but Shelley Duvall as Wendy, and Danny, played by Danny Lloyd. And that's the only actors I wrote down. So what we thinking, guys? What would you like to discuss first about this movie? You know, because there's many rabbit holes and things we can talk about. I don't know if we really need to explain exactly what went on in this film. I think most people have seen it, but I'm interested in Jess's thoughts really. So yeah, what are we thinking as a whole, as it stood up, as it stood the test of time?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it still does. You still put it on and it's still really enjoyable. Still amazing film.
Yeah, I ordered the Ultra HD 4K version, and it is stunning. I think. I don't think you see as many films these days that really take that much care and visually and just the sound. Everything is just something else, and I don't think I appreciate it as much as I did right now before. To sit there on your own with headphones on, watching it in 4K, it's just unbelievable. But what did you think, Jess, as a first time watch?
I really enjoyed it. I find like there's a lot of iconic scenes, obviously, so I feel like I have seen like half the film before because I've seen so many of those scenes.
Yeah.
But obviously, putting them all together was like kind of really fun for me and watching it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good.
See, that Jack is just awful from the very beginning, isn't he? He's
Well,
not.
this is the interesting thing, really, is that I actually, I mean, as a sort of a fan of Jack Nicholson anyway, it's funny how in that sort of opening sort of 10, 15 minutes, I sort of think of him as probably the most normal performance he's ever done, just in terms of how he sort of, he's in the office, he's in the interview, and he's talking with Mr. Allman. And there's a kind of it's strange. I mean, there's always a sort of a spark of craziness about Jack Nicholson in whatever performance he does. But it's interesting that little pocket of the movie, it feels like strangely normal for him. And I think that's partly the point. And I think also with that sort of opening scene, you can kind of there are small moments of humor in that interview scene, I think, because of what's obviously going to come afterwards. And I think Stanley Kubrick rarely, except for like stuff like Doctor Strangelove, he rarely goes into very humorous places, and when he does, it's quite dark. So when Ullman talks about I think it's Charles Grady, who hacks his wife and kids up. And he said, "Well, I rest assured that's not going to happen with me." And like everyone in the audience knows that it's going to happen. And I think that's like like a little small moment of humor from Kubrick.
Well, it just comes across, and I wanted to get this out of the way because like I didn't realise before. I've seen it a few times, maybe because I haven't watched it for a few years. But as a parent, he is so cold, isn't he? And as a husband. So I don't know why he was even married. What even brought him? I don't even know what brought him to actually be with a woman, especially her.
I mean, again, but that is an interesting thing as well that I've only just known. Now, I've seen the movie probably over 20 times. I think the extended version actually I've only seen now twice, but I've noticed that only this time that I don't think we ever really see them kiss in any way. I think there's a moment where Wendy kisses him, like when he goes up the typewriter, but only on the cheek. There's no moment when we see any sort of intimacy between them, which is, I think, a conscious decision because I mean there are loads of intimate moments in the book, but I think here sort of Kubrick's like deliberately trying to disconnect them. I think, and they're always constantly disconnected, and I think that's the sort of the coldness of it, as you say.
But she's trying her best, though, isn't she, to please him? I think she's putting the effort in, and he's just got he's not having it. He's just, I don't know. He just comes across so cold and so, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't want to be like that with my wife or my kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's just unapproachable. And she's like treading on eggshells every time she talks to him, and it's. Yeah, I don't know why anyone would put up with that. So,
but I also think it's kind of like sorry if I'm talking too much about this, but it's sort of I think it's also like because like again as I sort of said, it's sort of like he's being quite fair, like for Jack Nicholson, fairly normal in those opening scenes, and then gradually the hotel sort of like. I don't know. I think it kind of draws the craziness out, or the sort of inner horror that's within him. So it's kind of like he's repressed for that first bit, and the hotel sort of like, I mean, in my theory, the hotel kind of plays on his anxieties and his like sort of inner turmoil and the worst things about him, and then you sort of get Jack as he is inside, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think it's Jack as always is Jack because we don't. I've read the book, so I know there's a bit more to it. But like, he's obviously this false Jack around other people, and then I can imagine. I know the hotel kind of brings out the worst in him, but who's to say he's not like that? Because he's already hurt Danny before, hasn't he?
Yeah.
There's abuse going on. We know that. So it's just him, isn't it? It's whatever he's doing or whatever Again. Didn't he lose his job teaching for being violent?
Book. Yeah,
I think
that's what happens.
Yeah, so he's just not a very nice person. He plays it well. I just find him totally. I don't like him at all, and I love the actor. Brilliant. That he plays it so well, unlikable. Now, can I just like one of the things I touched upon that I've watched some on YouTube and it mentioned like abuse and things, and there is a scene, and I did notice this when Jack is waiting for his interview. He's reading a magazine, okay, and this magazine is not Playboy.
No,
is it? It's not Playboy. It's Playgirl.
And that that's the that's the theory that he's actually latently gay. I think isn't that the theory?
But yeah, and there's a small part on the you'd have to look at it, and I this was shown to me, and it says on there, and I'll read it out. So on the magazine, there's a little bit that says incest. Why parents sleep with their children, and it actually says it on the cover. So there's a lot in it about is he sexually abusing Danny?
But is that true though? Can you
You know?
can you actually read that from?
Yeah, from the cover.
I've never heard that.
I've
but
seen.
Yeah.
I've seen. it.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, yeah, and then it's all to do with the bear costume man as well, which always bothered me why that was there. I know in the book it's a dog, but you know, there's a big thing about bears. There's bears on pictures on walls, and things, and it's like even the lady. I don't know how much of it's extended in the version I've seen, but when Danny's not been well and the doctor's talking to him, and she starts just there's bear pictures in the background of that as well. I think no, he's laid on a teddy. He's laid on a bear. I mean, there's different scenes. You see pictures of bears on walls, and you see this bear, and then you see the bear, you know, doing what would you call it? You know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, So, and it was quite interesting, the program I watched about it, that there's no ghosts in this at all, and it's all in Danny's head, blaming it on ghosts, and he's just being sexually abused.
I think.
But yeah, and it does make sense.
I think Kubrick put in a lot of stuff in the film, almost not on purpose to do that, but I think he puts a lot of stuff in there that is purposely open-ended, so that then audiences can take away kind of different theories from it, because there are so many theories. I mean, there was one that popped up on YouTube. This was a while back, but it's like a theory that it's all in Wendy's head, and that Wendy's making it all up.
Yeah,
it like as she goes, and so yeah, I don't know if there's like one that can be hammered down as the like. I think there's so many that could and could not be, and I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, but there is ghosts in it, isn't there? There has to be. This Shining itself. You know, from watching Doctor Sleep, we know there's.
I don't I see that's the thing. I think if you watch The Shining just as The Shining, like Stanley Kubrick's Shining, because I know a lot of people take issue with that. The Shining, the film, is not very much like the book. I think if you watch The Shining by itself, because I think Doctor Sleep tries to do that thing where it tries to be faithful to the book, but it also tries to be faithful to Kubrick's film. And they are very, not so different, but they do have their big differences in them. And I think that where Dr. Sleep tries to answer those questions, I quite like them unanswered. You know, like the ghosts in The Shining are so left, like, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, this is the thing, is that the problem I have with Doctor Sleep, even though I think Doctor Sleep is a good film, I don't consider it to be a sequel to The Shining, even though
I agree. I agree.
It's because it's a different kind of movie, and even though I personally think there are ghosts in the Overlook Hotel, I think that ambiguity is so crucial to the way The Shining works, or at least the movie works. Whereas, I mean, Stephen King did have sort of dream imagery and did want to work with the psychology of the characters, but the ghosts are there. That's you know, that's just explicitly true. Whereas in The Shining, it's far more ambiguous and you don't exactly know. And I think that's far more, and not to take away from Stephen King, because I enjoyed the book, but I think the ambiguity creates so much more tension and far more fear, and because you don't know, it's far more unsettling, and I think that's crucially why it's so scary.
Do agree.
It's all right. Paul's sending me videos now. Maybe we'll talk about them next week. Come on, Jess.
But
is there any more thoughts from you?
Well, with
me,
the
Larry,
ghost...
and Ewan can talk
Yeah.
about this, and they're going to enlighten me on a lot tonight. Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I have questions because I would have looked up after this, you know, a video explaining certain things, but I hadn't got around to it. So I was like, oh well, Larry will do that for me, so it's fine. But with the whole ghost thing, at first I was thinking, oh, this is, you know, ghosts or something like that. But then someone does let him out of that room, which ghosts can't work locks like that usually. So I was like, surely there has to be a person.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's Dan. A lot of people think it's Danny that does it because of his like kind of. I mean, it could be any number of things, which is why I love it. There's no definitive answer.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing as well is that I mean I personally don't like these. I think it's a very modern trend of sort of YouTube videos explaining confusing movies. And I almost just don't I don't really like that because I like the sort of because obviously Kubrick meant for you to be confused, and the fear is all part of that confusion. And obviously, I'm assuming he wants people to have theories about it and to talk about it and stuff like that. But it's just these videos to say, you know, The Shining explained. This guy who sits in his bedroom knows exactly what Kubrick was thinking when he it's just like, you know, a lot of it is
like I quite like watching videos that are more like these are the things that you probably missed, like all these little kind of Easter egg kind of things. I know there's a lot of those in The Shining because I used to see them pop up all the time on like, you know, Tumblr back in the day. Used to like see things come up, and I know there was one thing that always popped up. Isn't there like symbols above one of the doors that mean something, but I can't remember exactly what it is. I noticed them and was like, I wish I could remember what they mean.
Symbols above doors.
Don't know on that one.
No. There's some weird symbols that have like some sort of meaning. There's these big red doors.
Elevator doors.
Yeah, the elevator looks like a mouth.
I don't think it was the elevator doors. There was a scene where I saw it was when Wendy is holding a knife and she's looking for Danny. And there's these big red doors and there's like a black line on the top with symbols on.
Well, I mean, it could be connected to the Native American stuff because, I mean, they were going for that. I mean, obviously, it says at the beginning that it's built on a Native American burial ground. But they also said, I was watching some documentaries about it, and they were deliberately trying to have a kind of, at least in the main sort of hallway, they were deliberately trying to do a kind of Native American-like design. In order to capture that, so probably maybe those symbols connect to that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe. But and then also with the ghosts, the twins, they're definitely ghosts, right? Because you know Danny has this whole like shining thing, so presumably he's seeing them a lot. So I presumed they were ghosts, but.
Yeah,
I was unsure about like Grady. I wasn't sure about him if he was real or not.
Mr. Grady,
because he shot himself, didn't he?
And also there are little things as well about Grady's storyline that are clearly deliberately sort of changed or they're inconsistent. And I think that's deliberately to make it confusing. So, for example, I think in the interview scene, they were talking about how Grady, it was 10 years ago the incident happened, and his name was Child Grady, and the children were 8 or 10 years old. And then later, obviously they're twins, they're not 8 and 10, they're twins at the same age. But also when Jack meets Grady in the goal, he refers to himself as Delbert Grady. And obviously that whole scene is based in the 1920s and not 10 years ago. And I think that's it's a deliberate attempt, I think, well, one, to confuse it, but also, I think it's also to increase that sense that it's like a dreamlike structure, where it does make it more psychological in that sense, because obviously, if you're just going by one man's analysis of it, like of Jack Torrance's analysis of it, he might not get things completely right. So I think that's almost like an attempt to make it almost subjective in that way.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to the Shelley Duvall character, Wendy.
Nice.
Wow. So, does she overplay it or not? I think she's really good. Personally,
She's
I think
fantastic.
she's really good in it. But there are...
Yeah.
And I hear things, people say, oh, she overacted it or whatever, but she actually looks terrified in parts of this movie. And she does scream a lot and things, but I just thought she was fantastic. Loves her son to bits and loves Jack as well for some reason. Like, no idea why.
I do think if it was again, this is one of my favorite films of all time, so this is just a little criticism, but I think if The Shining were to be made today, I think there would maybe be a little more sort of character explanation for her, only because there's sort of we know very little about her other than she's like a mother and she caters to Jack. So I think maybe if it were made nowadays, there would be a little more explained about her. But then again, you kind of get the kind of she's sort of because she doesn't have the same experiences, at least not at first, as Jack or Danny. There's a kind of like almost an innocence there, and when you sort of take away the storyline as well, it's like it's almost like she's us in that situation, if you know what I mean.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Is The Shining inherited, or is it?
In the book, it is, isn't it?
How does someone?
Yeah,
end up
in the
with
book
the
it is, but in the film, I think it's just like something that someone can have. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's.
Where does she get it from? Where does he get it from? Is it Jack?
Yeah, well, that's
Jack?
I think that's what happens in the book, and it has been speculated about the film because obviously Jack and Danny see more ghosts than Wendy. At least at first.
Yeah.
So that sort of offers an explanation as to why they see things and she doesn't. But yeah.
Wow. Right, Larry, enlighten us, because I've kind of run out. I've run out of bits to say, really, because this is going to be my favourite podcast of the year. Really, movie we've watched anyway.
Okay.
Having this new version just made it something else for me. But there are things I know you would have picked up on that obviously I didn't. So what are your thoughts?
Okay, so apologies if there's a delay, because I think there's a delay. So, yeah, there definitely is. There definitely
You're fine
is.
at the moment. You're fine.
So I watched Room 237, which is like basically a documentary of people's theories on the film, and it is worth a watch because some of them in there do touch upon some interesting things, like did Stanley Kubrick fake the moon landing, because there's a lot of moon landing imagery, especially like with Danny's jumper and stuff. Then there's, in my opinion, there's ridiculous ones.
That's mental.
Where yeah, there's really like obscure ones, I guess, where people think that Kubrick put his face into the clouds of the opening shots with the ominous music, and then there's ones that are like kind of they're there, but they'd be there anyway. So like someone, I can't remember exactly the name of the person, but someone was adamant that if you played The Shining on top, like to both films, like The Shining playing together, but one of them reversed, then they would match up in imagery of what's like going on. So the opening shots, then seeing all like the end, carnage that's gone on. And yeah, I mean, I stated it earlier, I think that there are some theories that are like fun to speculate, I think like what happened in Room 237 and all that is very interesting. And I think that, like Ewan said earlier, it plays into why it's so scary and like why it works is because it's the unknown.
What happened in Room 237?
Well,
what happened?
So it kind of leaves it
So you got the twins were shot. Were they?
The twins were axed up, weren't they, by Grady? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
In 237, it's kind of alluded to, isn't it? Because you see the ghosts of the woman in there, and it's almost played upon that, like, in the scene where Danny goes in there, it's made to be that the ghosts have attacked him, and then obviously, like, Jack Torrance goes in and then experiences that. But then there's a number of things that it could be. I mean, there's a theory that suggests that Jack abused Danny in that room when he goes in. There's loads. I mean,
I believe that.
But then Kubrick said in, like, I can't remember if it was like a documentary or if it was maybe supporting with the film, like, you know, the making of sort of thing. But he basically left, like, kind of a quote that basically said that the film was in many ways a sort of reincarnation film. But he was very prominent to put in sort of, because, like, with the Grady's and, like, the caretaker, and then at the end when you see their photo of Jack, I mean, there are so many different theories. But I guess the one that I would allude to is that, like, it's a never-ending cycle that will always try and replace and bring in, like, murder and all that. You know, the hotel seeks that out and wants that to be, you know, continued on. Resurrected through. That's how I see it.
So, so the photo of the photo you see on the wall, the picture on the wall with Jack in 1920 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible?
I'll hand over to you and on this
Lawrence.
Well, do you know what I mean? I'm slightly confused. Like, he's always been there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's again, it's something. It's often something that I almost don't like to speculate on, because I think the impact of that final scene. I mean, obviously, yes, the illusions about him always being there and always being the caretaker. Offers a confusion, but I just love the fact that, I mean, it's probably one of my favorite final shots of all time, because you sort of I think everyone kind of probably when it came out, everyone kind of expected the loose threads to be tied up and everything to be explained, because obviously this came out at quite a significant period in horror film history. I mean, you know, it's just come after the 70s. Yeah, 1980. So The Exorcist have come out. All the, you know, Friday the 13th was about to come out, and, you know, all these prominent movies. And this is partly why Kubrick wanted to go into the genre, because I think it's his film before that was Barry Lyndon, and that didn't make much money, and so he needed to make something more in quotes commercial in order to make it back. And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people wanted things to be tied up, and that's part of the reason why the film didn't do too well on its opening, I think. But I think that final shot of just Jack being in the photo, it's another eerie layer to the entire story, and it adds up another question, and it's almost this feels weird saying because it's such a, you know, it's a genre movie, but it feels almost experimental in that it's kind of like, you know, he's almost saying, you thought I was going to answer all your questions? Well, I'm not. I'm going to put another question in there. And I think again, it adds to the fear as well, because you just don't know what's going on, essentially, and you wonder. And again, you wonder if anything around him is real or it's all in his head. And you've got so many things to contradict that. So obviously, when he goes into when he gets let out of the pantry, for example, that sort of like disproves, sort of slightly disproves it about whether it's all in his head or not. And then with the photograph, that exacerbates that even more. So it's like, Kubrick is constantly playing with your head, and I think that's, you know, part of the reason why he added the image of the maze. and everything like because the maze isn't in the book, I don't think.
But we all on this podcast, we all love mazes.
What's your favourite maze, Kevin?
There was one. Where was it? There was one in Norfolk. Where was it? But apparently, I think it was either your left hand or it was one of your hands. If you walk the same side all the time, you'd get out.
Yeah, it's the stick to your left, isn't it? Stick to your left, and you'll eventually get out of a maze.
Yeah, so like I did that because I didn't want to get confused, as you can imagine, and end up lost for days. So like I did that. No, it was at a place in Norfolk called what was it? It was amazing.
My favourite's Black. It's amazing.
Nice. That would be a great name for a maze. Amazing's Maze. No, it was called Bewilderwood. Right? Right, in Norfolk. So, Bewilderwood. That was brilliant. So, I do like a good maze, and I hope.
Yeah, my favourite's Black Gantine, but in the Isle of Wight.
I've been there as well.
I love going there. Yeah.
Is it still there? Is that half
the maze is still there, but like at this point, you can if you're not a kid,
there.
I think like the maze is still now hasn't been like brought up, so you can just see over it if you're like an adult.
Oh. Yeah, for me.
What's yours, Ewan?
Yeah, we should totally all go. Bones Horror Podcast goes to Black Gantine.
We do a podcast from the maze of Black Gantine. Yeah, that would be amazing. We all live on the coast, don't we?
Not really.
Pretty much. Not far.
Near the.
You
well,
no,
I'd have to drive for about an hour
in the
to
big
get
smoke,
there. Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying a minute ago, really quickly,
yes.
like Kubrick was a big fan of David Lynch, wasn't he? And he loved Eraserhead.
Well, David Lynch.
Yes, yeah, and I mean it's interesting that as well because I mean Eraserhead, was David Lynch's first film, and I mean he wasn't completely famous yet. I mean he was mainly famous for when The Elephant Man came out in 1980, so the same year as The Shining. So clearly Kubrick just knew everything about what was going on, and he actually screened Eraserhead for the cast and crew.
I'm not so you can definitely see the implements of it though, like the inspiration of it definitely in The Shining, which is what I actually love about The Shining.
Yeah, exactly. And I've watched Eraserhead recently, and you can definitely see. I mean, I think the most common aspect, like between the two of them, is the character is almost like walking between different stories. And I think that's it. So for example, you've got Henry in Eraserhead who's kind of moving between different bits. So there's like the person like next door, and there's his storyline with Henry, with his wife, and then with his baby, and just like the little disparate things that happen. And you've got that with The Shining as well, with Jack Torrance just suddenly lingering into the Gold Room as there's like a big party going on, and he has this thing with Grady and everything. And I think that's very specific to a very sort of dream logic, which is again a part of why both The Shining and Eraserhead are scary movies, because in a dream it's almost like anything can happen, and when you're dreaming you're sort of almost improvising a scenario that happens and you just go along with it, and part of the fear of that is that you don't know where you're going to end up, and I think that's crucial to why The Shining is so scary as scary as it is.
It's a great film. So we move on to like bonus. Yeah, are we at that point? Have we all said enough? Does anyone want to add any more to
the
it?
score?
When I was watching, because I watched it on Amazon, there's a when you watch anything on Amazon, they give you like a little trivia thing on the side of the screen when you hover over.
Yeah.
And right at the end, I was seeing how long I had left, and it was like the last scene, and it came up saying that there was an extra scene at the end, but they've removed it a week after it was released, which shows Wendy and Danny at the hospital afterwards, and it shows all the police searching the grounds, and they tell her that they can't find Jack's body anywhere.
I mean, I read the script still exists of those final pages. I sort of read that, and that was the as you say, that was the original ending, and Kubrick pulled it, and it's rumored that the footage still exists somewhere, but I also think because isn't that essentially the beginning of Doctor Sleep when they're at the hospital? I can't quite remember.
I haven't seen it.
I can remember them being at their home.
Yeah, I was going to say they're at home.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I mean, again, watching this extended version of The Shining, which I've only seen once before, it's quite interesting. I mean, as you say, that there's that hospital scene, but also sort of scenes that I haven't really seen in detail as sort of being put into a movie which I've seen over 20 times, and I think that gives it sort of almost another edge to it. But also there was another scene that was cut out, which Diane Johnson, the co-writer, talked about, which was when Jack looks through like a massive scrapbook of like the history of the hotel and everything, which is actually in the Stephen King
you can see it on the table.
Yeah, and Diane
it's
Johnson
in the film as well.
Yeah, and Diane Johnson said that she was annoyed that that scene had to be cut because it was like the first indication of like the shine of the Overlook sort of absorbing him, and you can see sort of black and white images of like on set of that, but it's sort of, you sort of like kind of hope that there's like, I don't know, you often hear about like lost footage of things like coming back, or lost reels of films, and you kind of wish that there was somewhere that this like clip existed or something.
Well, that's quite interesting to go into as well, because there are certain shots in the film where people believe that there is like theories behind them because of like continuity errors. So like the chair being moved and his typewriter changing. But mentioning that book, there's actually a scene where he's on his typewriter, and after Wendy comes in, kisses him on the cheek, and they have that argument, the book that you're on about is actually on the table suddenly, because that shot's used from a scene where he's looking through and then goes back to typewriting. So it's quite interesting because you can see reminiscences of, I think, stuff that was cut or was changed around. I don't think the theories when they're like, "Whoa, Kubrick moved this chair to catch you out," and I'm like, I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
The score as well is another thing I'd mention.
But it's also interesting. Yeah, the
like,
score. The score is like,
fantastic.
it's Wendy Carlos, who also worked with Kubrick on A Clockwork Orange to create that kind of really synthy, moody sound. And I only learned recently that she's a very reclusive person. She's still alive, and she rarely allows her stuff to be on like Spotify or anything. But you can kind of sense that kind of, I don't know. It's so weird, and and she sort of mixes it with like classical music. So I think the opening track is like a Mozart thing, but she's like put it through as like a synthesizer, and it's like got loads of these sort of weird chantings. I mean, this is mainly the opening.
It's beautiful, I have to say. By headphones, it's absolutely beautiful. It's the first scenes with the music, and what is it that the camera's traveling on? Where it's panning over the car.
It's a helicopter, isn't it?
Is it on a little air?
But it's like I don't.
Seems very close.
I don't think I've ever seen another helicopter shot in any film that's as smooth as that one.
Yeah, it's.
There was something I did notice, actually. Amazon had something about that, but I didn't read through it. I just saw it pop up when I started the film, and they said something about the smooth shots and the camera.
But again, that works with the entire sort of visual style of the movie. And Kubrick actually had, I think his name's Garrett Brown, who invented the Steadicam. So a camera that's essentially attached to a person, and then they sort of run with the subject, and it works so beautifully. And you sort of wonder why more ghost movies haven't adapted that method, because it's so sort of, because the camera is, I mean, a camera is a character in essentially most movies, but here you can sense that it's almost like a ghost following all the characters around, and you're sort of like, I mean, even with the helicopter shots, it keeps on following the VW Beetle, and it sort of floats very like sort of phantom like across and then back and then across. It's just it's just incredible. I mean, it's it's part of the reason why it's definitely my favorite horror movie of all time.
Well, it's gone right up in my estimations now. So should we give it a rating?
Yep.
Otherwise, we're going to be at 3 hours long. What are you thinking, Jess?
I'll give it an
8.
Yeah.
Wow. For a first one, you watch it again, would you? Like,
yeah, definitely.
Get more from it second time.
Yeah, I probably watched it extended as well.
You haven't seen Doctor Sleep yet, have you?
No.
What are you, Larry?
This fits the same as The Thing for me, and the Thing was a 10. So if it is in the same category as The Thing for me, like they're both like in that just realm of perfect horror for me. So I'd have to give it a 10, the same as The Thing.
Yeah. No. So Stephen and Paul would probably give it 1. That's them sorted. So Ewan,
it's a full 10 bonus for me.
Wow, 10 bonus.
But
Don't get
also,
much better than that.
I watched it I first watched it when I was like about 13, I think. And it's kind of formed like, pretty much the basis of what I think most horror films should be, which is a bad, I suppose it's a bad judgment, but it's just the way my mind works, because it's just I think it's the first time I saw a horror movie that was different from the others. I hadn't seen many by that point, to be fair, but it was far different from the usual slasher sort of type, or even
totally.
like haunted house movies where you've just got like shots, jump scare, and the same sort of structure. Whereas this just felt completely different from anything I'd ever seen, and I still continue to love it. So yeah, it has to be 10 bonus from me.
So I'm going to give it 9 and a 7. Right? It's like it's nearly perfect for me. Nearly perfect. The only thing that bothers me a little bit, and I shouldn't be bothered by it really, is the apparent Stephen King doesn't like it. And he prefers the miniseries.
Yeah, but he wrote that, so of course he prefers it.
Which I find hard to believe. We should do that one week.
In the sort of in the author's note to Doctor Sleep, when he wrote that, he said that he just didn't understand why people found The Shining so scary. And I thought there was also another quote that he said he thought Kubrick thought too much and felt too little. Which I think, it's an interesting thing, because the characters are quite cold in comparison to the book, and Kubrick had an IQ of 200. He was a really proficient chess player, and he understood so much about psychology and everything like that. So in a way, Stephen King is right, but that doesn't take away from how good the film is.
No, that's amazing. So we're giving that pretty much 9, aren't we?
Yeah.
Probably not. It's got to be the number 1 film we've done.
I remember the first time hearing about The Shining was when watching Twister ages ago, and there's a scene in Twister where The Shining is playing on the cinema bit, and it gets taken away. That was I remember that was how I realized about The Shining. So I used to think, what's that film? That looks terrifying.
Right then. So let's move on to what we watched this week.
What have you been watching?
No, seriously, what have you been watching?
Hey Kev, it's your old buddy Keith here. I just wanted to get in touch to say that I'm sorry that I couldn't be on the 50th episode of the show, but the cops raided my place, and I had to spend the night in the fucking slammer. Anyway, I just wanted to say that you're doing a great job on the show, especially since you got rid of them other 2 fucking dingbats you had on. But if anyone tells you otherwise, you let me know, and I'll cut the fucking cocks off and shove it down the throat. Anyway, you ever want me to come on, you let me know, buddy. Hey, you've got my number, right? Right?
I feel really bad this week because, like I was just saying to you and earlier, I've watched 3/4 of full films. Because I've been bad. Because there have been instances that I've been watching something and maybe not appropriate for children who've then turned up. so I've had to turn it off. And this keeps happening. And if I don't remember what I've been watching, so I've got like 4 movies, and I want to talk about them, but I can't till next week. These are the ones that are on that list. Like I've been watching Kronos.
Oh, yeah. Is
it Kronos?
Is that the Guillermo del Toro?
Yeah. So I've been watching that, and I need to finish it, and it's really good. There's a few bits like that, and I'll talk about them more next week. And there isn't much really I've been watching. I think I'm just looking at my collection now because I think I spent 2 nights watching The Shining because I watched all the extras and stuff as well. So to get my head around it. So I haven't really watched much, but I did finish a book. So this one's taken me about a month. It's by Hunter Shane. It was called Creature. And it's pretty much about illness. So it's the best way of explaining it. There is a lady who is very, very ill. I think her bones break very easily and things, and she can't move around. She's very ill. Her husband takes her for like a holiday, a couple of weeks away to a cabin, and something's watching them from the cabin. But I don't want to give too much away because there are people that will want to watch. I actually would make a good movie, but will want to read this. But shall I give it away? Why not? Spoiler alert. There is like a Bigfoot swamp ape thing, right?
No.
Watching them, but this Bigfoot is linked to her. So if this thing gets hurt, she gets hurt, and vice versa. And it's all to do with the illness. And I'm not sure if she's kind of what's the words? If it's coming. This Bigfoot is coming from her, or whether there's just a link between the pair of them, but they both end up. But it's such a. The thing is, with this book, it is so well written. Honestly, it's so well written, and the way it turned at the end, like the last, I don't know, 50 pages or whatever, I wasn't quite expecting that, but it did work really well. But it draws you in, and her illness, and everything that's going on between the husband and the wife, and it's so sad, and it ends up, and quite a few people die, who are in it from this Bigfoot, but Hunter Shea does like his creature feature kind of thing, but it took me a month to finish it, and Dejera in Sweden finished it in about a day, I think, so he done well. It took me a month of reading in the evenings, falling asleep, rewinding a bit, and then that's how my brain works. But I would highly recommend Creature by Hunter Shea. Yeah, definitely. If you do read a lot, I know you youngsters don't tend to, but like I do every day of my life. So like I've started something else now by Hunter Shea, so I'll be getting onto that. So have you watched anything, Ewan? Has it been maybe Hawaii 5-0 this week, or
there'll be a new 80s reference every week.
Or the Dukes of Hazzard? What was?
I've been watching a lot, mainly because Barry Jenkins, who did Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk, has brought out a new series on Amazon Prime called The Underground Railroad, which is a sort of.
What's he done since Moonlighting? What's he been doing since Moonlight? Because obviously that was 80s, wasn't it?
So it was Moonlight. There was If Beale Street Could Talk, which was based on the James Baldwin novel, and now he's embarked on this 10-part series for Amazon Prime, which is really hard going, but it's a really good series. Basically, it sort of imagines. So it's based in sort of slavery era America.
Is Bruce Willis in it?
No, Bruce Willis is not in it. I don't think it would have been appropriate. I don't think he could, swarm in and just go like, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. But no, it's it's about this slave who escapes this plantation, and it's sort of reimagined. So there was this thing called the Underground Railroad at the time, which was basically people helping slaves escape to other areas, and this series sort of reimagines that in a sort of magic realist setting, that the Underground Railroad is like a literal railroad that's with a train that runs across sort of underground across America. It's essentially about that, and it's a really, really good series, and I sort of recommend it. It's hard going, and it's probably a bit too long because it's about 10 hours long, but it's really good, and I recommend it. Also, there's a new drama on ITV coming out next week called Innocent, which is a very basic premise about sort of someone who was convicted, but she's let off because there's been new evidence to suggest that she might not be guilty of her crime, and her crime is killing one of her students and then maybe having an affair with him. Having an affair before she killed him.
Is there someone famous in it?
Yeah, it's Catherine Kelly. Catherine Kelly's not especially famous, but she's been on a lot of these sort of ITV dramas, and it's really good for what it is. It's not anything groundbreaking, but I think after watching the Underground Railroad, I was sort of desperate for something that's much lighter than
Underground Railroad.
And then I've been watching Halston, which came out today, which stars Ewan McGregor. And it's about the fashion designer Halston. And that's quite good. I've only seen a few episodes, but it sort of follows this guy's life from sort of fairly sort of menial beginnings and then becoming like an international fashion designer. But I'm quite enjoying it because I'm quite nostalgic for those sort of late 60s, early 70s time period stuff. And it's quite fun just watching him just sort of like develop all these costumes while it's like, and the soundtrack's really amazing. It's got like Velvet Underground and David Bowie, and it's quite fun from that point of view. So we're watching that. Also, just as sort of as a kind of footnote to this, I guess, I would encourage people to watch the making of The Shining, which was directed by Kubrick's daughter Vivian. And I think it's probably the most accurate making of.
And that's called The Making of The Shining, is it?
I mean, on the DVD, it's like Making The Shining. But I think, I think, like Lawrence and Jess will testify, it's sort of, I mean, a lot of making of videos are very kind of happy and, this is what we do on set, and isn't it great? And we're all really creative, and it's great. But this making of video shows how just stressful it all is. And even though Kubrick on set was a bit of a prick, I can recognize so many things, like from my time at university and shooting movies. You can see so many things, people getting so frustrated and trying to get this one shot and just like hating like a lot of what's going on. And I think that sort of makes it like one of the most genuine making of videos like ever made. And it was made in 1980 when no one was really making of videos. It's only become a recent thing where they've just been stuck onto the DVD. But I encourage people to watch it. It's only about 35 minutes, so it's not.
Yeah, definitely. Larry?
So I watched 2 films mainly this week, but before going into them, I would recommend, if you've not seen it, to go onto YouTube and watch a video called Hi, I'm Shelley Duvall. So all you have to type in, it's like 3 minutes, and it's just called Hi, I'm Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall, obviously from The Shining. It's
okay. Yeah,
it's just a 3-minute video, and I won't say anything about it. Just watch it. It's so funny. I watched 2 of my favorite films. I watched The Lighthouse, and I also watched, where is it? Lost in Translation. It's probably still a bit of a delay. I think there's still a bit of a delay.
Lost in Space. That's the sequel.
So nice. That's nice. Lost in Space. with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, two really good films.
So Lost in Translation, that's a good film.
Love Lost in Translation.
The Lighthouse, I'm not so sure on The Lighthouse.
It gets
personally.
a full on 11 out of 10 for me. The Lighthouse. I absolutely love it. I couldn't recommend it highly.
There's sort of like a lot of sort of visual allusions to The Shining in that as well, isn't there? Of like when Robert Pattinson has the axe. It's very sort of, it's almost like a visual homage to when Jack Nicholson has the axe.
Is that the old pecking the eyes out, kind of? Is that in that?
I can't remember.
Is that in that one? Did he have his eyes pecked out?
No spoilers. No spoilers. No spoilers. No.
No. Oh, that was cool. That was cool. I always get them mixed up. Crows and a lighthouse. Right.
Yeah. There we go.
I'll get me coat. Don't worry.
But that's basically it. I haven't watched anything else. Mainly been just like doing a bit of work and stuff.
Yeah.
More filming bits. Well,
man goes to a lighthouse, gets a bit confused, gets his eyes pecked out.
Nice.
Yeah?
Condensed.
Oh wait, did I do Jess? I don't know. No. Okay. What have you been watching then?
I didn't watch any films, but I finished Shadow and Bone. Very good, very very good. I'm very excited for the second one. I really want the books as well because there's 3 books. I was looking at them online. The first one I think is called Shadow and Bone, so I don't know if the series is going to be just about one book.
I think they had to.
Or if it's spread out across each one, I'm not sure.
I think they adapted the first 2, or they because I think the first one didn't have much. The first book didn't have much context, and so and then the context was added in the second book. So they've added that to the series just so everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah, because I think there's like 5 books so far. So I definitely want to read them. But yeah, the show ends on definitely there's going to be a season 2. Like, very good. As I said before, kind of got that Game of Thrones feel without it being quite as gritty. So it's a bit easier to watch at times, but there is still some really like kind of savage death scenes, I guess, put in there. So yeah, very good fantasy kind of show if you're into that.
I need to watch that. Yeah. That's on my list.
It's good.
It's on my list.
But that's it.
Okay. I was just trying to think what else I watched. But I have been watching Sleepaway Camp 3. I did finish Sleepaway Camp 2, by the way. I don't know. What episode did you do that episode?
I did, no.
Sleepaway Camp? No. Jess did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Larry did. So I watched the second one and I'm nearly finished. I like the second one a lot. The third one's a lot of fun as well. Pretty much the same. But yeah, I'll finish that off next week. So that's it for this week. So next week. Now, quite a few months ago, we watched The Conjuring. I thought, I've always wanted to do Conjuring 2. So I think we should do that next week with Conjuring 3 coming out soon. It'd be quite nice. Who hasn't seen The Conjuring 2? Have you seen it, Jess?
Yes.
So we've all seen it.
I'm not a fan though.
Right.
I thought it was better than the first one. That's all
I'll say. Do you want? I'll mainly save it for next week. But what I loved about the first one.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, what I loved about the first one is kind of I had an opposite effect, but I'll go into it next week, obviously.
Well, this podcast is why we love wardrobes. It's from The Conjuring. You know, we love wardrobes. So I think there's wardrobes in Conjuring 2 as well, and chairs. So
I thought you meant something else.
But I'm quite looking forward to it. I'll get my son to watch it with me. No! There's a chair in it with an old fella in it.
Hey, we're allowed to meet up as of next week, so
yeah,
could always watch Conjuring 2 together.
You come around here and watch it if you want. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
You're all welcome, to be honest. But a bit of a trek for you, but like
road trip.
That'd be really nice. So yeah,
road trip. Back to our podcast road trip.
We should do that.
It'll be like the trip Jack Torrance takes at the start of the show.
What with the ominous music, the bum bum.
Yeah.
So we will be back next week with our episode 53.
Woo.
Wow, The Conjuring 2. So we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
You're ignorant.